Oops, hang on a second. Every time I think I've got it like totally nailed, I'm just coasting, I'm just standing there waiting, then there's always something stupid that I forgot. Okay. All right, dropping the link in. Right there, Andrew. Should be the green light. All right. So hey, today, believe it or not, we have acquired somewhere along the line some sense of actual schedule, and let's just recap what it is. All the rest of that's not super relevant. We did freedom of speech. We spoke our mind last week. We got intellectual property this week, and believe it or not, I have lecture slides. Believe it or not, for this class, I have slides. And then next week, we got writing workshops, and then I'm going to bring in a guest speaker, ideally for the 15th, which I'd like to do. I am noodling on just who to bring in, but I'd like to do that still. Anyway, so we can talk a little more about that, in terms of topics, whatever. But you know, you bet, Andrew. So as far as this one here, because of just my late kick in with everything, with my surgery and everything, there's a few topics I like to do, like to talk about women in computing, and I think that's really, really an important issue. I think that for a lot of you that want to go be entrepreneurs, the entrepreneurship thing is a very relevant issue. I'm so, and at the risk of, I don't want to put anybody like, which do you care about, with some sort of public declaration. But if you have any opinions about that, I do have a little bit of flex in terms of how to approach that topic. In other words, or how to approach that day. In other words, whether we should um, talk about women in computing. I have a potential guest speaker that I've wanted to reach out to, um, that I think is a very interesting, anyway, really great friend for starters, but she's got a very, very interesting story. It might be interesting. She's also freaking brilliant, PhD in computer science. Um, so I'm maybe a little partial. Her name is Neha Rungta. She's just a dear friend, and uh, that's certainly, there's a strong desire there. And then, like I said, the entrepreneurship thing. A lot of you are going to leave, and career-wise, this is going to be what you're going to go do. So understanding a little bit about kind of what that world looks like can be valuable. So if you wouldn't mind, kicking me feedback on that, it'll help me a lot to maybe try to decide which of those. I might even be leaning, frankly, toward Neha if I can get her on the schedule. I was going to do that last semester and failed, so I'm more motivated now, even. Okay, so that's it. As far as the schedule and what's coming up, we're winding down, which is it's good. It's really a good thing. We all need a break. Okay. Okay. All right. Is there anything else housekeeping? I feel like I'm losing my voice. I had kind of a short night last night. I don't know if that's it. Um, Maybe a little agua is going to help me. I don't know. But I do feel like I'm losing my voice. Just in time for my second COVID shot on Thursday. just before this class. I'm getting my second Moderna shot. I'm expecting to be in bad shape by Friday. Never done anything quite like that before. Like, just go in knowing that I'm going to lose Friday to like fever. Like, that's never been a thing ever in my life. So, welcome to weird world. Okay. So, hey, so today, the slides are called Technology and the Law. I was put them on the schedule as intellectual property. It works either way. Um, what I want to do, I've got 2 days scheduled for this. I think it's important. I mean, after everything we've talked about in this class, which is crazy diverse in terms of just the topics that we can go after, which is part of the fun for me. Um, this is one of the actual canonical topics. This is actually one of the topics that is like whatever that the accreditation wants you to make sure you cover. I think, or in any case, our standards for our accreditation for our ABET stuff. But anyway, what I want to try to get into, it's really interesting. I always wanted to go to law school. I don't know that I actually wanted to be a lawyer, but I wanted to go to law school. And I went a different path. I went the master's degree and PhD in computer science grad school path, but it was an unscratched itch. The other one, interestingly, that I really wanted to do was get an MBA. I mean, when I was an undergrad, I was debating law school, MBA, or PhD in computer science. And I would literally kind of and then I thought about other grad school. I just knew I was going to go to grad school. I wasn't quite sure what. And so it's interesting to me that I find myself now, doing things over the years with entrepreneurship and starting companies and kind of investing in that respect and making products and launching things and doing the business side and doing a lot of work in kind of expert witness stuff, right, with my consulting firm, doing a lot of intellectual property litigation support, I guess, is probably the best way to put it, and a certain amount of research in that space as well. And so, in a really weird twist, I wind up with the PhD in computer science, and then doing a lot of grad school, sorry, MBA type behaviors with startups and entrepreneurship, and also a lot of law. It's a weird dynamic. Um, but law is one of those things that's kind of, I think it's a really, really fascinating topic. It's certainly germane to this class, right? So, so I'm just gonna, so there's only like 17 slides here. I'm planning 2 days, today and Thursday for this. Um, Unless the shot just knocks me on my butt so hard that I'm dysfunctional come class time, which I have a really hard time believing, but that could happen, I suppose. Um, so I just want to dive on in and talk about some of these things. This is also one of those things where if you have any questions, um, you know, by all means, please, throw them out like always, throw them out. Uh, and, and I'm just going to kind of roll. If we finish early, we finish early, but I won't spend more than 2 days on the subject. One of the interesting things about this whole domain of intellectual property, I sometimes call it the other IP. If you've done any networking stuff and you understand TCP/IP at any level, you at least understand what IP stands for, which is Internet Protocol. And so I call this the other IP because when you hang out with lawyers and they say IP, they're not talking protocols. Um, but um, the reason that we have intellectual property laws on the books really has to do with the desire to protect innovation, to protect creation, to protect invention, to foster, to reward, to motivate, um, you know, creative arts, right? and put this one way. Imagine that you live in a world in which uh, wow, it happens even in our world with the internet, but even in a world without the internet. Imagine that you wrote this book and it was amazing. It was, it was a tale of two cities. You wrote this book and you're just in this environment and then somebody comes across, you print like 100 copies, you give it to friends, and then somebody just comes across it, loves it, thinks it's really great. Then they just simply take your book, type the whole thing out or typeset another copy of the exact same thing. They stick their name on it, which would be plagiarism, right? They stick their name on it, but they've got the backing of a big publisher. And suddenly they sell 1 million copies of the book you wrote under their name. Is anybody like okay with this? Like, why would I stop somebody from, doing whatever they feel like? It's like it really tests the limits of I think it tests the limits of libertarianism in a sense, but not really, because I don't think there's any self-respecting libertarian out there who is going to say that there shouldn't be intellectual property rights or property rights in general, right? Um, in other words, even for political folks that politically lean away from a ton of government involvement, there's just no question, I think, yeah, I'm somewhere off the radical fringe. I don't think there's any question in the other some large percentage of the population that there should be protection for, you know, that there should be the notion of a form of private property called intellectual property. And I don't think any of you would argue with that, right? Um, by the way, is everybody awake? I got nothing. You can pander if you want and patronize me. Drop a comment. I feel like I'm in talking head mode, and I'm always uncomfortable with just talking, doing the talking head thing. So uh, it helps just a little bit to feel like there's liveness. Again, when we're in person, like we will be in the fall, it's not that bad, not as hard. Um, anyway, what am I trying to say? But the question is, the devil's in the details, right? How do you work around? Like, let's say, for example, that it's clearly unethical. I think you would tend to say, um, Gabe's going hard for the coffee. I get it. Others claim to already be awake. They could be lying. Christians sound asleep, but honest about it. Josh also sound asleep, also honest about it. Uh, okay. Okay. So dude takes your book, sticks his name on it, publishes it. Charles Dickens. Who is this plagiarist Dickens? I think we'd all be pretty bad with that. Okay, now let's go. He doesn't actually put his name on it. He doesn't claim to have written it. He just puts your name on it. I mean, it's exactly a knockoff replica of your book, and but he again produces 1 million copies as you, and then pushes those out, you know, to the market, sells 1 million copies, makes a couple bucks, nets out a couple bucks a pop from your book. He never claimed to be you. He didn't misrepresent that this wasn't your writing, but he's not going to pay you any royalties. Anybody okay with that still? You know, you okay? Just the problem is always, and this is actually true with a lot of things involving the law, and a lot of these sort of, oh, nice, Devin. Um, yeah, yeah. So yeah, John just said, if it's, what are your odds of winning in court? Yeah, that's another issue. What do you actually, you can go to court, but it's clear that there's an imbalance in the way the system works. But here's what I guess I want to try to get at. As we've talked about this whole semester, we've talked about how the issues kind of lie within these gray zones, you know, and one of the big problems, I think, is when we get into this kind of binary thinking, black and white thing. How far be it for us as CS types to get into binary thinking, right? We're a little trained toward disambiguation, are we not? We're a little bit trained toward binary things, at the very least, bits, We're trained to a world in which you know exactly when you're going to take which branch of the if then else statement. And so sometimes we gravitate toward that because we're kind of black and white thinkers. Sometimes we weren't quite so black and white when we got into it. And somehow being in that space kind of made us a little more, trained us a little bit more toward more concreteness in our conclusions and a little less comfortable with our doubt about things. And I guess what I'm trying to do in this class is restore that balance back a little bit and say maybe some of that doubt was really valuable. Maybe some of that understanding and embracing the gray zone. You know, um, yeah. Josh made a comment about open source software. Well, and with open source software, the open source contributors are voluntarily contributing to and they do get credited, but it's a voluntary contribution of the intellectual property. You're just looking for the credit, and maybe you want to try to do a good thing in the world. So, um, let me see. If I go back far enough, by the way, I can actually read the comments without my glasses. Yeah. The Supreme Court, Google versus Oracle. In fact, I'm going to do you a solid here, real quick. Um, yeah, that's a very, very interesting thing. There you go. That, my friends, is the ruling from the Supreme Court on Google versus Oracle. And I haven't not read it yet. So I'm still, I've read a couple of articles about it, but I don't have a lot of confidence in general in journalists. I'm not picking on. I'm not calling fake news here. I'm just saying, as a general rule, I don't trust journalists who typically are not required to have statistics, for example. I don't think so. To distill and digest the world for me, I try to go, I try to go past that, get me to some original sources, and kind of draw my own conclusions. Right? Again, That's not a partisan rant. That's more just all journalists have, for the most part, my questioning, non-loyalty. I'm gonna question what they're doing and how they're doing that. Um, oh man. So John asked, do I believe the government will use antitrust laws against big companies? Oh man, I think so. I think eventually, yes. Not sure when and what form it'll take. I mean, that's not without precedent. The government tried to break up Microsoft, which I believe they should have from antitrust perspective, relative to the operating systems, sort of system portion and uh, applications, right? Because there's a bit of a unfair strategic advantage historically with the fact that you know Word would come bundled on Windows, for example. Well, it gives you if you're Word perfect and you're just simply selling a word processor, it's a bit of an unfair, you know, market advantage that allows you to leverage that whole thing. Put another way, the notorious robber barons, the Carnegies, etc. Um, the part of the struggle was when you controlled the steel production and you controlled the railroads so that you could charge different prices to competitors shipping on your railroads and give yourself, sort of free shipping on the railroads. You set up a differentiation in the market that is sort of intrinsically, restraint of fair trade. And then there become some very interesting questions that many of which are really above my pay grade in terms of how do I feel about that? Do I think Amazon has a fair, an unfair market advantage at this point with their ability to deliver something to my door tomorrow cheaper than the manufacturer of that product could deliver it to my door. Yeah, yeah, I think there's does that keep other people out? Yeah, you know, did they get there fairly or unfairly? That is a question. That's a question because they were pressing things. Do they have a monopoly position? Maybe, maybe. I mean, what's the point at which you have an effective market? Does Facebook have an effective market in social media? In some respects, I'd say yeah. In an absolute sense, I'd say no. Google, yeah. Effectively, yeah. Absolute sense, kind of yeah. Ish. So I mean, there is definitely a thing right now in terms of antitrust. So I don't even know if I have antitrust on this set of slides, but it's such a great question, John. Right? But I think the social media companies, right? Twitter, Facebook, search engines, Google, who else shows up? Um, when you think tech companies, you kind of will throw big companies like Apple in there, but Apple doesn't even have a dominant position in the laptop market, for example, or in the desktop computer market, or you know, and I don't even know where the phone split is these days. I haven't looked that up in a long time. Like, what's the market share split between Droid, for example, and iPhone, and then between the biggest Droid maker, I believe to be Samsung, and iPhone and Apple, right? But anyway, there's so many issues that come into play when you bring the law into play. But I think that you have to talk about Google, you have to talk about Facebook, Twitter, Amazon as wholly, and if there's others that you would jump in, that you would throw in there, that I'm just not happening to say, and I might agree with you, but those to me are companies that create a certain kind of um, it's an intense strategic disadvantage for companies trying to come into that market. Um, and there are things that are sort of not legal, like coming in and undercutting a market at a loss in order to capture a market, drive others out of business. Then when you're ensconced and you own that space, then you start raising your prices back up, until you get to back to profitability, but you've driven everybody else out of business first. It's an interesting question, right? And you could talk about Walmart as well, right? With the price competitiveness as a function of volume. Now, the interesting dilemma with that, by the way, I'm not on my slides, right? Have you figured that out? The interesting thing about that is it's historically, this is again, gospel according to Dr. K, but historically, antitrust was kind of, you could see it like with the railroads and the steel production, you could see it in part because there was an unfair ability for a company to charge more because there was no competition, right? We have a weird situation with Walmart and with Amazon where because of their dominant scale, they charge less. The reason why you know what I mean? So then is that a bad thing? I mean, I'm not, you understand, right? I think we all understand each other well enough by now to know that when I say, is that a bad thing? I'm really asking it as a question. I'm not offering a veiled assertion in the form of a question. I really mean it as an honest question. If a company acquires such a dominant position from a scale perspective, so that they can offer prices to you that are cheaper than you can get anywhere else, was a crime committed. You know what I mean? Is it a crime simply to be so good at what you do that it's really hard for other companies to show up and do that thing, right? You know what I'm trying to say? If there's a sports team that dominates, it was a crime committed. Maybe, maybe, but necessarily, I don't know. You know, being successful economically by itself, in my opinion, this is my assertion, isn't necessarily an assertion that a crime has occurred. A crime might have occurred, but I don't believe that that financial success by itself, economic success in the market, um, is an indicator necessarily that something bad actually happened. They're stirring the pot, huh? Let's stir the pot. I'm going to hit a couple of comments, then I want to go. I have these slides. Um, Anyways, John, it was just such a great question. And yeah, I obviously have a lot of thoughts about it. Gabe, Amy Klobuchar introduced a new antitrust bill, and which I've not seen, so I don't know, what's in that. I'd be very interested. I could probably go look it up. Or, but if actually, Gabe, if you wouldn't mind, like just like dropping something about that, um, maybe in January. Um, Google lost the video war to YouTube, and then they just bought YouTube. Now, that's not uncommon either. Um, Google also lost the social media war to Facebook. Remember Google Plus? Oh yeah, of course you do. Um, Let me see, Alex. You're talking about internet service providers? Is that what you mean with ISPs? Um, yeah, that's okay. That's a really, really interesting question, right? Yeah, you are talking about internet service providers. Where I'm in Traverse Mountain right now, and there is one and only one option. I can tether to this bad boy, or I've got what is my internet here? Veracity? Is that what it's called? You know? Now I don't know, and I really don't know what the dynamics are when you get into government regulation of industries. That's actually part of when you get into what is called crony capitalism. A lot of times I feel like that term gets thrown around and is misunderstood. The cronies in crony capitalism is government, right? It's this idea that I've got some, local authorities who are cutting me certain advantages. Um, and again, it's all, so I want to just say this: gray zone. I started talking about it. It's an issue of line. It's an issue of where you draw the line. I think it's always about that. It's almost never you are completely evil. I am completely righteous, and you should go eat worms or something. I really, it's just that's not what it is. It's a question of like for example, tax benefits for a company to come locate itself, say in Utah Valley. Ever a good thing to do? Never a good thing to do. Well, I would say that it could be under certain circumstances a very good thing to do, right? Let's say Amazon decided to locate their second headquarter. Sorry, I got like crap on my glasses that I keep cleaning them, but they're not coming clean. Um, I mean, if Amazon decided to put their whatever, their second headquarters or whatever in Lehigh and create 50,000 jobs. Now again, that would be crazy. That would actually so dramatically transform the dynamics of the valley, right? But independent of that, I'm just saying there are times when a community is motivated to say we're going to cut you a tax break. Then you got, oh man, oh, now we're getting into it. Now we're getting into it, um, right? Because some would say that's never ever appropriate, right? Corporate corporate welfare, if you will, right? Not all corporations are wealthy, by the way. Some corporations are struggling, but what corporations do is hire people, put them to work, then they pay taxes, they pay FICA, they pay payroll tax, they pay benefits, they provide insurance, they put a lot of people in the local community to work, and they spur the local economy and they do a lot of things. So corporations do that. So if they do that and make money, is that a bad thing or a good thing? Or is the principle it's better if we are worse off economically so long as a company doesn't profit at the same time. But if you know what I mean? And these are honestly, I think, heart and soul of some philosophical debates. I'm going to give myself, by the way, 5 more minutes of this diversion rant that started with John, who started all this. I also went, I took the bait pretty hard, but because I do want to hit some of these things that I think are just informationally really valuable. Okay. Um, yeah, Andrew, monopolies are dangerous when they stifle innovation, right? And what's really interesting is that the current, what we would think of as the current monopolies, Amazon, Facebook, Twitter, Google. I don't know. Again, I'm looking for maybe Walmart. Um, I don't think they stifle innovation. I don't think they sit back and go fat and sassy. I think they are in fact relentlessly innovating. I read a book once. It was basically a biography of Bezos and the foundation and evolution of Amazon as a company. Relentless, absurdly relentless innovation. Microsoft back in the day, same thing. Apple back in the day, same thing. Facebook, same thing. I mean, those companies, even when they were big, were relentlessly innovating. Um, Andrews, wait, Andrew, did you really have a friend that got sued by Apple for opening a tech company that used a pear for a logo? Now it
Yeah, it
depends.
was crazy. It didn't even have like it wasn't even related to Apple at all. They opened a tech company and it didn't even have Apple in the name. It just had a pair, and he got sued and had to actually change it. So now, yeah, I can't remember what he had to change it to, but the logo actually had to change.
But it wasn't even like ripping off the stylized Apple.
No, not even close. They maintained, their lawyers reached out to him and were like, this is too similar to the fact that Apple is an Apple. It was just crazy. I mean, you're like, that just seems ridiculous.
Do you remember the comic strip Foxtrot? One of my all-time favorite comics. And they always had this personal computer that was always called the iFruit, little I, capital F, iFruit. Clearly, leveraging Apple on that, right? Um, Man, that's crazy. That's crazy, Andrew. Um, Let me see. So Camille said, I think there are issues when these companies bar the way for entry or raise the cost of entry in their market in a way other than just being the best at what they do. And I agree with that. And the difficulty is sometimes companies get into that kind of crazy market advantage position because they're so good at what they do. You know what I mean? Like, for example, let's just take, we just finished the college basketball season, right? Men and women's college basketball, both wrapped up. I really was cheering for the Zags. I really like Gonzaga when they're not playing BYU in the West Coast Conference. I really do like the Zags. I think they're just a high caliber team and class act school and team, and they got their butts kicked by Baylor, which I'm still a little bit upset about. But the point just being, you're up there in Spokane, Washington. You're Gonzaga. You're in Spokane, Washington. Granted, you just went 31-1, and only the third team in NCAA history to go undefeated and lose in the championship game. Okay, the other two were Ohio State and Indiana State. Uh, Indiana State featuring Larry Bird. But my point is, uh, you know, Gonzaga started the season ranked number one and stayed number one all the way until they just lost this game. Um, and as a byproduct, they are going to get better athletes. So let's take another school in the West Coast Conference, my alma mater, BYU, right? Is that unfair? Is it unfair for Gonzaga to have a stronger recruiting advantage, a tremendous, I mean, ignore BYU is probably not even a great example because ignore the religious aspects. You know what I mean? It's a harder recruit to BYU. Let's just get rid of it. Let's just go UVU. Okay. I mean, we got Mad Dog for our coach now, right? Uh, Former. you know, dude, right, former Stanford, standout, couple of rings with LA. That's our coach. But, that's our men's basketball coach at UVU. My point is it unfair that Mark Few at Gonzaga can recruit better players than Mark Madsen at UVU? I would argue, unless you're paying them, or unless you're doing certain things that are illegal or breaking the rules or what have you, I would say, no, that's not fair. That's just called the market rewarding success, innovation. I don't think there are very few, there are very, not many coaches in the NCAA better coaches than Mark Few, in my opinion, of Gonzaga. So guess what? Success begets success. The best companies can also pay better, recruit the best employees. Boom, you've got this virtuous cycle. It's harder for the other companies just to recruit the same caliber of people. You can't pay them as much. And that's where they want to go, even if the pay is more somewhere else. Yeah, I'm just saying there's just a dynamic where the market is a relentless teacher, and sometimes the market teaches you that you ought to have Mark Few as your coach because he's just that good. Unless you find out again that they're paying players, and the different dynamics. Okay, I'm going to do a quick scan and then I'm going to jump back to these slides. Tragically, but let me see. Let me see. Andrew got $5. Um, yeah, Alex, in terms of trying to monopolize services, then there's always that question about is that reasonable, legal, fair? What is that? Um, okay, link from Alex, which I obviously can't watch that right now. We can't watch it. Um, Camille has Comcast. I know I went through that. Good news, bad news on when it comes to Comcast from my experience. Let me see more about the Apple thing. John points out Google Fiber, just their little competition. But it's interesting because competition, historically, competition drives the price down. It is weird to me when there are monopolistic positions, like say Amazon, that the prices go down. It's a weird, weird dynamic. Okay. Um, all right. Thank you, Gabe, for the link from Senator Klobuchar, which I am very intrigued to read. It looks like that is on her. That's a link to her site, right, with that information. Okay, all right. That's thank you so much for sharing that. Um, oh, nice, nice, Alex, on the fridge. If I step away and squint, looks like an iPhone, looks like an iPad. Yeah, uh, yeah. Sometimes in patent litigation, it can sometimes feel like that. Um, oh man, I'm just scanning. I'm scanning fast now. Chad, yeah. Okay, so beluga, yes, the industry does matter. Let me give you an example. Um, there was a record company in the '60s that you may have heard of called Apple Records. Um, do you remember or know anything about Apple Records? They were created by a band. The Apple Records was created by a band, which then became the publishing company for this band's albums. I suddenly feel like I'm Rick Beato or something. Who's the company? Who's the band? I already said that the company was Apple Records. Who's the band? I'm gonna let you drop your things in there. Yeah, Beluga, you've absolutely heard of them. I promise you. Thank you, George Harrison. The Beatles. The Beatles created a record label called Apple Records. And their logo, if somebody can find this real handy, it would be great. Basically, it was like this green apple, and it was cut in half. And in the center of the old vinyl, somebody find that? Just a picture of like the Apple Records logo that was right, Camille, Dove soap and Dove chocolate. So here's what happened with Apple Records when Apple Computer started. Right there we go, there we go. Now I think they've got, depending upon side A, side B, that there the other side had the apple cut in half. I'm pretty sure. Edible soap. Yeah, good idea. Andrew, don't quit your day job, man, but keep those ideas coming. There we go. There we go. That was the way they did the thing. Now, along comes when was Apple Computer founded? I'm trying to say it's like 70 when was Apple Computer started? Um boom boom. Come on, man. I don't have it. I'm searching on my phone, which is probably a problem. 76. Okay. I was in high school when Apple Computer was started. Okay. Apple Computer starts in 1976. And when did Apple Records start? Probably in the 60s. I mean, it had to be the 60s. 68. Okay, so it's 1968, and the Beatles create a record company called Apple Records. And then 8 years later in 1976, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak create a company that they call Apple Computers. Okay, what did Apple Records do? Anybody know the story? Apple Records sued to stop Apple Computer from using the name Apple. And I don't remember how high up it went in the US court system, but eventually the ruling, I think appropriate, because there is that idea that that like Camille said, Dove soap and Dove chocolates. There's no reasonable risk of being confused, right? Like you get into an area like you go down to like Provo, and it was always like Cougar Record Store, Cougar Videos, Cougar something, Cougar this, right? You don't see as much of that in Orem with the Wolverines, but I'm just trying to find something where, or you get to like Iowa City and it's Hawkeye everything, right? Hawkeye Electrical, Hawkeye gas station, Hawkeye because of the Iowa Hawkeyes, right? Sports team. Um, you know what I'm saying? You're not confused about when you call Hawkeye Electrical if you're calling up the football team. You know, there's no confusion in the market. So when they were sued, um, okay, okay, Gabe, you just lost the chat. I'm sorry, man. You better keep the brewing going, man. Keep pounding down the coffee because uh, I I have no words. I have no words for you now, Gabe. I'm turning my back on you for a moment. Um, okay, what was App? Anybody want to guess what Apple Computer's argument was? Then they prevailed in court in the U.S. Okay, what was Apple's argument? Apple Computer. What was their argument? Why they should be able to use the term Apple for their company name? I'm gonna wait because this is just too good. That's right. No, Harrison, too strong, too strong. It's broader than that. Okay, Harrison said they don't make music. Sure, but what else? It's actually a broader claim than that. They don't play sound. No, they did play sound. I'll just say it. They weren't in the music business. They didn't sell music. Eh? Eh? They didn't sell music. Yeah, amazing. Um, and then, of course, fast forward a bunch of years, Apple Records is not relevant as a publisher, as far as I know. Apple Computer becomes, I don't know if they still are, but they were at least, the wealthiest company in the world. I don't know. right up there. And but one of the things that made that happen was the iPod and then the music store, the Apple Music Store. And that is one of the reasons, and you're probably too young to remember this, but there was a very long stretch of time. Go look up the stories on this one. There was a long stretch of time where where the Beatles' music was not available for sale on iTunes. The Beatles' music was not available on iTunes because Apple Records was still pissed. Like, you're not in the music business. I don't know if I'm I'm projecting now, you know what I mean? What they must have been saying to themselves or to Apple, right? Um, uh, okay, Caleb. Is that really true? Uh, yeah, yeah. Not saying that I think you're wrong or anything. You know, it's my more just like what really? Nice. Anyway, but you see what I'm getting at, right? It was that there was that division. Like, we're not in the music business. We sell computers. The court's like, no, that's right. Well, then what happens later on, right? And then can you then come rolling in and just say, wait, back this thing up 40 years or more. And crazy, crazy. Okay. Now, you know what I'm going to do? Because we got a half hour. I'm going to do this. I have to do this. Okay. I'm going to, seriously, you can't stop me. Only I can stop me. And only I am more than willing, as you know, to stop me. Look, at the end of the day, it's really in this class. There's crap in some classes you just got to cover because you got to have that. This is more about the journey and the adventure and the discussion and the exchange. There's so many things that pop out of our random discussions inspired by your comments that I never thought of before we were live in the moment, you know. Um, okay. Intellectual property is essentially a legally granted monopoly, right? Just like private property. I have this phone is my property, right? So are these pens. Turns out, so is Hubert. Hubert, my property. Okay, I have a legally granted monopoly to accessing these pens. If you take them away from me, it's called stealing. Same with my phone, same with Hubert, same with my books or whatever, right? That's my property. You don't get to just come take my car. We call that stealing. So the property is essentially, private property is a right to control that property, right? So long as you're not, there's the old classic chestnut that my right to swing my fist, stops where your nose begins is the old expression. Of course, if I swing at you and miss your nose, I'm still breaking the law. But, point just being that there are guidelines around what I can sort of do. Like I can have this pen, but I can't stab people with it. You know, I can I can have this phone, but I can't commit wire fraud with it. I can have a nice stereo system in my home, which I don't have, by the way. Had a much nicer stereo system when I was 18 than I do now. But if I have such a nice stereo system, I can't just crank it up at 3 in the morning and blast out my neighbor's windows, right? So I have this like private monopoly, um, government granted, really. I mean, it's government's protecting my right to that property. Well, intellectual property is the same idea, only it's involving technology. And it could be any kind of technology. It could be invention, it could be code you wrote, it could be your logo, it could be books you publish, music you produce. It's any of these kinds of property that are by their nature mostly the products of intellectual engagement and intellectual investment, right? So why should they, right? And I'm going to just kind of roll for a little bit, and it's cool if you want to drop, if you want to drop your comments at all, that's great. But I may not stop for them, or I may. You're like you will. But why should the government grant a monopoly to someone for their technology? Well, the example is we talk about technology, but a book that I've written and somebody just like rips it off and goes and sells copies and makes all the money. All they're doing is just, they're doing certain work, but they're disproportionately benefiting. And the reality is that um, they didn't have the right, the intellectual property right to do that. I controlled that. By having a copyright, I have a monopoly on what happens with my words that I've published and produced in some way. Same with my music for whoever owns the copyright. Same with my trade secrets, same with my patented inventions, same with my logos and my trademarks, right? All of those things. It turns out that there are always, and welcome to this whole semester, pros and cons, right? There's advantages and there's disadvantages about the whole thing. There just are. There are downsides to it all, right? And I posted some links to some things that are. I didn't overload the readings on this, but there's a couple of really interesting articles on the website on Canvas, right? Um, like the video by Rick Beato, um, just this notion of copyright, um, and eventually what turns into some weird dynamics on, social media, um, video sharing sites like YouTube, um, where everybody in some respects maybe an overreaction, um, based in some reasonable motivation, but then at some point it becomes misguided. So check out some of that stuff. But just understand that there are pros and cons, always, always, always. So um, the fundamental motivation of the whole thing is to reward innovation and creativity, to protect the rights of the creator, and to foster innovation and creativity because innovation and creativity benefit all of society, right? We would like to have, so, when it comes to things like patents, I'm going to grant you a monopoly to that, to even do that invention at all, in exchange for you to disclose it. Now it's in the public good and can be, we figured out how to turn lead into gold. You patent it for X number of years. You're the sole person that gets the right to do that, in exchange for disclosing it to the world, right? As opposed to like just hiding it to yourself and just turning lead into gold by yourself, but not disclosing how to do it. Um, yeah, so Camille said the whole EpiPen thing, right? A significant downside. Right, right, right. When you do control a market, um, and then you get into you're talking about, Camille, like the crazy price gouge thing, right? With the EpiPens, and you hold power of life and death, and now, but that's, I think, an example of where when a monopoly extends to a kind of a crazy price gouge, you get into, now it feels like you're violating that sort of social contract. Remember we talked about the tragedy of the commons in conjunction with open source software, and I didn't assign it as reading, although maybe I will next time. But in a sense, the commons is this shared culture, this shared society, right? That has so much that overlaps. When you grant to somebody a reasonable right, like if you invented this, cure for cancer, should you be rewarded for that? I would argue yes. Um, but does it also then give you this opportunity to kind of, play God in the market, right? I mean, that becomes, I think ethically we would kind of go, wait, cancer, people are dying. Well, no. Same with EpiPens, right? You know, I have a brother who's allergic to bee stings and carries it, and another really dear friend, that carries an EpiPen, and there's an issue of life or death. And are you really going to say, you don't have the whatever hundreds of bucks, you know? So that, Matthew, is an example of the cons of granting a monopoly. Like if I give you a monopoly over the ability to sell and therefore to set your own price for some medical thing that there's no other way to get it, you know, and you're going to set it at $1,000 a pen and make $1 billion overnight and kill 1 million people, attaches itself to this notion of intellectual property. That is the dilemma. That's the struggle. That's the struggle. Um, No, and so yeah, and Camille, this issue of I did not know anything about this with Emily Dickinson's works owned by Harvard and printing new editions. I don't know exactly how the law works on that. Um, yeah, and Gabe, that's an interesting question. The taxpayer dollars is an interesting question. Camille, there was that historically, right? The notion of it's the life of the author plus so many years. And when you think of it as something like Emily Dickinson, well, shouldn't that be in the public domain by now? And I would have to say, yeah, based on what I know about it. But what about the original Mickey Mouse drawing, the original the character of Mickey Mouse? It's copyrighted. But in that case, you've got a difference between a person, Walt Disney, who drew it, and a company, I don't know what they're called, what the official name is, Disney Corporation, which still has a corporate interest in. I mean, if Jobs and Wozniak both died, would Apple have to cough up the Apple logo? No. So does Disney have to cough up Mickey Mouse because we've exceeded the amount of time since Walt Disney died? Well, what I guess I'm trying to show is just that there's just this entanglement in the gray zones. That's all. And trying to tease that apart through the legal process, the legislative process, is just kind of funky. It's full of a lot of things where you're like, well, that doesn't make sense. And there's a temptation to be just like, well, F the whole system, and the reality is that difficulty is a little bit inherent, you know, you can't, right? You can have personal property and there are things, but there are limits to your personal property. You have freedom of speech. There are limits to your exercise of free speech. You have freedom of religion. There are limits to the exercise of that religion, right? So, I mean, I'm trying to say and you have to find at least get to pathological examples. Like if your religion is that I have to take the neighbor's cat and kill it, well, we would kind of go, well, your religion doesn't extend to that, you know. So there's always natural limits that are placed on on anything. Gabe, it's not your cat, man. Let the cat go. Um, Aaron, I do not know. I don't think that's it. I am 99.100% confident that UVU does not own the rights to the code for your programming projects. I am. I will bet $10. I'll bet $100. I'll bet $1,000, Aaron, that is not how that works relative to the university. Any of it when you're a student. I believe that you own the intellectual property for anything you do as a student that you produce. I am very, very confident. Now, and there's that sliver, right, where I could be wrong. And if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
I'll just apologize in advance, right?
I was told that if I wanted to continue using for my senior project, if I want to continue using the code and go take that further as a business idea, that I needed UVU to sign some disclosures or whatever, signing over the rights to the code or
I
something.
don't think that's true. We can talk offline, but I feel really confident that that's not true. I certainly
Well,
don't think
it's
it
cool
should
if
be
it's not
true.
true.
Okay, let's agree to that.
Yeah.
But I'm really confident that that's not true. But let's talk offline, okay, Aaron? I'd be very interested to hear more of, you know what I mean, more of the details. Um, Well, here's the thing. So Camille just said, I just accepted a job offer today. Um, and the documents included whole paragraphs about both invention and work that you do while working for them and who owns what. So it doesn't stop with school times, but I'm gonna torque that a little bit, okay, Camille? I'm gonna say it didn't start with undergrad. It starts with employment. Undergrad, you're paying them. There's a sort of there. I don't even know what the legal basis is, but I do know that when you work for a company, they're putting a lot of ideas in your head. You have access to a lot of ideas, a lot of people, a lot of technology, a lot of tools, a lot of things. And therefore, there's a process by which ideas pop into your head and it's all being nurtured and you're being paid by them. And, now enforceability is another interesting question, right? What can they actually enforce by way of that, employment contract? For example, if you do something, did you know that Wozniak had that kind of a contract with HP? Gave HP the right of first refusal for anything that HP employees invented. Woz took the Apple One to his management at HP and disclosed it and said, "Do you want it?" and gave them the right of first refusal. They said, "Nope, you can have it." And then he went and started Apple with Steve Jobs. Uh, okay. All right. Let me see. Let me see. Let me see. But anyway, but Camille, yeah, I really don't think it's part of school times. Let me see. Um, John read that UVU does own your schoolwork. I don't think it's true. I'm betting dollars and pizza on this. Tough to read here, John. Let me just looking at it. This is interesting and it's related. All right, created by an employee, which you're not, as a student, in the context of being a student, is what, right, Aaron? We're talking about you're a student, you do an assignment for a class. So one is not it. Created on institutional time with institutional facilities or with state financial support. C is easy in the sense that if you're being like funded by your lab, for example, and you're being paid, once again, it's like the employment thing that Camille was talking about. Use of institutional facilities, that's an interesting one. And again, most of you are running on your own laptops and not dropping into a computer lab. And I don't think there's such a thing as institutional time when you're a student. Number three, educational material that involves significant institutional resource contributions, such as materials created through distance education. I don't know exactly what that means. Commissioned by the institution, pursuant to a written contract? Nope. Work for hire? Nope. I think we're 0 for 5, in my opinion, John. That is almost exclusively about employees. One is employees. Again, 3 I don't understand. 4 is employee, 5 is employee, and even 2 is thin, in my opinion. And I don't know what the definition of institutional time is when you're a student anyway. So that's my. I'm still gonna. I'm still gonna wager pizza on my position. Well, right. Okay. So Camille said, teacher's discretion about whether you post it. That I totally get, just from a cheating, kind of a thing. I am just really, really confident that you. Would I buy this entire class pizza if UVU does? I don't know. It's a big wager. I'd love. Okay, my fundamental problem is we would overload Nico's. That's my problem. Okay, fine campus community. Um, yeah, so you guys are members of the campus community. So am I. Yeah, yeah, full and part. So I'm granting that you're a member of the campus community, which means that these 5 rules apply, but only under these 5 conditions. So you're going to have to crank up 2 and 3 for me, John. I think we got to all agree that 1 is not applicable, 4 is not applicable, and 5 is not applicable to you as students. And two, to me, the only thing that could possibly happen is you're funded by a teacher, then you don't own that any more than you do own something that you're being paid to build for a client or for a company. So C is not an issue. It's back to employee. Facilities, I think you're pretty much all doing your stuff on your own laptops. And I don't think institutional plot time has a meaningful definition for students. And I don't know what 3 means. Oh, it's educational material. Like you're producing educational material with institutional resource, like the learning center is pouring their people into helping you build these educational materials. You wouldn't then have a right to just go grab all that and go sell it. We're 0 for 5. Yeah, I'll buy pizza for everybody. No, John, I don't think so. I'm Pizza would be reserved for anybody who substantively participated in the overthrow of my distorted and wrong ideas. You'd have to actively participate to get the pizza. But yes, anybody who wants to wade in on this issue, I will wager you pizza with no downside for you because I don't want you to buy me pizza. But if I'm wrong, I will buy you pizza. And I'm going to go so far as to say if it's on your own laptop and you never used a campus computer. Anyway, okay, let's keep going. What do we got time wise? We're having fun. Um, all right, that's the motivation. These are brands of intellectual property, okay? And we're going to actually hit each of these pretty quick. Patents, copyrights, or if you're from certain parts of Utah, it would be patents. Patents. Am I saying that right? Patents. I worked on a legal case once with an attorney from Utah who said patents, and it threw me every time. I think she was from Layton. I'm not completely sure though. It was somewhere near the mountain. But anyway, copyright, trademark, trade secrets. I want to talk a little bit about employment agreements. Camille raised the issue. Intellectual property rights, non-compete in corporate, situations, and non-disclosure agreements. Okay, we're going to hit all those. How can we possibly do this with me at the helm? And the answer is it's highly doubtful. I am skeptical myself. And we only have 10 minutes right now. Here we go. Patents. We have 7 minutes. Yeah, it's a limited monopoly, set of exclusive rights, limited time period. Here's the bottom line for patents. You have the right to exclude others from practicing the claims. Okay? Um, it's got to be new, it's got to be inventive, useful, industrially applicable, and it has to be non-obvious to one of ordinary skill in the art at the time of the invention. Those are all key ideas. Non-obvious means a certain thing. One of ordinary skill in the art means that's a term that means something. And at the time of the invention means something. I want to drop a couple on you right now because I think you're going to get a little bit of a kick out of this. I hope. Let's see. Let's start with famed inventor and rock god. Yes, Edward L. Van Halen, who holds several patents. The late Eddie Van Halen, one of the great, amazing rock guitarists of all time. And he basically built this little strap-on thing that you could, actually, man, Eddie Van Halen, he did a lot of electronic innovation. He was like an absolute geek. I love, man, this is, by the way, in the history of patents, that is a legendary figure one, is it not? Including the rock and roll face, scream face. It was just tremendous. Anyway, check that one out if you're interested. But Van Halen was actually, he would like tear into the electronics and do things and play around, and he created certain electronics. It's outside of my space. And I play guitar, but not that kind of guitar. Now let's talk about this one. Let me blow this one up. Scout it. Method of exercising a cat. Okay. A method for inducing cats to exercise consists of directing a beam of invisible light produced by a handheld laser apparatus onto the floor or wall or other opaque surface in the vicinity of the cat, then moving the laser so as to cause the bright pattern of light to move in an irregular way, fascinating to cats and to any other animal with a chase instinct. This is fantastic. Now, also features an absolutely epic figure one, legendary, and I don't know where they got this laser pointer. Who decided that was a laser pointer for the rest of, the history of humanity? This thing right there, okay, this is the claim right there. The claim, this is what is claimed. And it starts here, one, and goes to there. A method of inducing aerobic exercise in an unrestrained cat comprising the steps of. This is what the holder of this patent has the right to basically, nobody can do this, presumably without paying a royalty or something to this. Depends on how aggressively they're enforcing this patent. Okay. And you're like, okay, that's crazy. Van Halen, legit. Okay, let's go legit on Van Halen. But okay, last one. If you thought that exercising a cat was absurd, wait till you see this one. See what it's called? And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh, when was the filing date? 02. 2002 was the filing date. It references all of these patents. The examiner here went to all of these references, apparently couldn't find it. Now you're like, okay, surely this linked list couldn't be a linked list, not a linked list. Well, we would probably have to check the figures. Let's look at the figure. Let's look at figure one. Oh, I don't know. There's an item with a pointer and then maybe a supplemental pointer of some form. They can go anywhere. It's crazy sauce. Yeah. No. They patented in 02, issued in 06. They patented the linked list. Now I don't know what the history of this patent has been. If anybody challenged it or whatever, Oh, multiple pointers. And again, it's very short. 4 columns, crazy short right here. That's the claim. That's the claim language right here. That's a bad patent, okay? That's a bad. It is literally, it's nothing but the linked list from your textbook. And somehow in the process, So these are that's a pathological example. Exercising a cat with a laser pointer, also a pathological example. Eddie Van Halen, legit rock god. Isn't that amazing? Let me see. Yeah, other comments. We're about out of time. But here's the deal. It has to be not okay, let's say this. Since the dawn of cats and laser pointers, we have been making cat chase red dots since the invention of laser pointers, right? And there's some issues about why that could even make it through. Linked list is to me completely inexplicable. That to me is inexplicable and inexcusable. It's so I mean, look, it's called linked list. Go to Google, type in linked list. It's going to direct you. I mean, it's like start at least by understanding like what was the innovation there. I've never looked at the file history to really understand. It's accessible. Never looked at it. We're out of time, but here's what I want to do. We are right here on this one. We'll come back on Thursday. The problem we have every single time, I think, is that there's actually so much to dive into and go into that all I can really do is do it like a tour, kind of a high level tour, and maybe pique some interest along the way, or there's no such thing as here's Dr. K's curriculum encapsulation of everything you need to know about computers and society here in this package. Go. I don't think that book exists. It's too big. It's just too big. So the best I think we can do is get you writing a bunch and get a nice tour going. That's been my goal from the beginning. So, all right, I'm going to cut loose though. Right now, we're on this one though. When we come back on Thursday, everybody stay safe. Um, I'm getting my shot. I'll be shot up when we meet again on Thursday, and I'll give you a full report about what's going on right over here. So,
Hey, Dr. K.
all right,
Dr. K.
yeah. Who's speaking? Who
Are we
speaks to me? Josh.
still supposed to turn in the LinkedIn profile, and was that due March 2nd then?
Oh, conceptually, yeah. I don't, where we're at right now, right? I don't care when I do want it because I want to still
Okay, for sure.
conceptually, I want to take a peek at it. And deadlines are a loose concept right now. So,
Thanks.
so in other words, no, there's not going to be any penalty if you drop that on me right now. Not a problem.